Is this some kind of sick joke? My father's coffee cup crashed to the floor as he stared at me from across his desk, recognition flooding his eyes. 15 years earlier, he had thrown me out onto the street with just $200 in my pocket, telling me I was throwing my life away and would end up begging for scraps. Now I stood in the executive suite of Meridian Technologies with the company acquisition papers in my hand, papers that made me the owner of the corporation he'd served for 2 decades. The security badge on my lapel read CEO, while his said Department Manager. The girl he had discarded was now the woman who controlled his future. As the color drained from his face, I realized this moment wasn't what I had imagined all these years. It was much more complicated, and what happened next would shatter everything both of us thought we knew about success, failure, and forgiveness. Before. We jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Chen. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Diay, Portland, where success was measured by degrees and job titles. My father, Victor Chen, was an electrical engineer with unwavering standards and ice-cold discipline. Our home operated like a military academy. Perfect grades were the minimum expectation, not cause for celebration. Dinner conversations revolved around academic achievements and career prospects, with my father serving as both judge and jury. Second place might as well be last place, he'd say whenever I brought home anything less than perfect. The world doesn't reward mediocrity. My mother, Ellen, had passed away when I was 12 after a long battle with cancer. Her absence left a void that my father filled with even higher expectations and stricter rules. Without her warmth to balance his rigidity, our relationship grew increasingly strained. Despite the pressure, or perhaps because of it, I excelled academically. By senior year, I was class valedictorian with acceptance letters from 3 Ivy League schools. But while my father demanded perfection in academics, he had little patience for my true passion, computer programming and software development. Programming is just a hobby, he'd dismiss whenever I tried to discuss my latest coding project. Law, medicine, engineering, these are real careers. The rest is just playing around on computers. The breaking point came 2 weeks after my high school graduation. I'd been accepted to Cornell University with a partial scholarship to study computer science. My father had different plans. I've arranged everything, he announced over dinner one evening. You'll attend Stanford, pre-law, then law school. The Chen family will finally have its attorney. I set down my fork, my stomach knotting. Dad, I've already accepted Cornell's offer. For computer science. We talked about this. His expression hardened. I never agreed to that foolishness. I've paid the deposit at Stanford. It's done. You had no right to do that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is my future, not yours. A future I'm paying for, he countered. A future I've worked 20 years to secure. You think you know better than me? Computer science? For what? To design video games? Artificial intelligence, I corrected. Machine learning, the future of technology, he scoffed. Fantasies. While real professionals, doctors, lawyers, make actual contributions to society. Something in me snapped after years of bending to his will. I'm going to Cornell for computer science. That's final. My father's face turned to stone. He stood, up slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. If you walk away from the path I've set for you, you walk away from everything. My support. This home. The Chen name. All of it. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Stanford or nothing. Law school or nothing. Those are your choices. I looked. At him. Really looked at him. And for the first time saw not the intimidating figure I'd feared disappointing my entire life, but a man so rigid in his thinking that he couldn't see beyond his own narrow definition of success. Then I choose nothing. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What followed still haunts me. 3 hours of shouting, doors slamming, ultimatums. By midnight, I was packing what I could fit into my backpack: clothes, my laptop, and the few sentimental items I couldn't bear to leave behind. My father stood in the doorway, watching coldly as I gathered my belongings. "You have until morning to reconsider," he said. "After that, you're no longer welcome here." I didn't respond. I kept packing, tears streaming down my face despite my best efforts to contain them. Morning came, and my decision hadn't changed. As I prepared to leave, my father appeared one last time, holding an envelope. $200, he said, dropping it on the table. "That's more generosity than your stubbornness deserves. It'll run out quickly. When it does, don't come crawling back expecting sympathy." I took the envelope, my hands trembling. "I won't. You think the world will bend to your whims the way I have all these years? You're in for a rude awakening, Olivia. Without my support, you'll be working retail within a month. That computer fantasy will crumble when real life hits you." "At least I'll be free to fail on my own terms," I replied, shouldering my backpack. "Freedom?" He laughed bitterly. "Let's see how much you value freedom when you're hungry and alone." His final words followed me out the door. "You'll never amount to anything pursuing these foolish dreams. Mark my words." I didn't look back as I walked away from the only home I'd ever known. The morning sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk, mirroring the darkness I felt inside. 18 years old, no family, limited funds, and an uncertain future that suddenly seemed far more daunting than it had when I'd boldly defied my father the night before. I had nowhere to go, no immediate plan beyond getting away from my father's house. I walked for hours, eventually finding myself at a small coffee shop downtown. As I sat nursing a cup of coffee I could barely afford, the reality of my situation began to sink in. College was still months away, and even with my scholarship, I had nowhere near enough to cover tuition, books, and living expenses. My father had been my financial plan, and now that support was gone. The confidence that had fueled my defiance began to waver as practical concerns mounted. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, another emotion was taking root: determination. My father believed I would fail. He was counting on it. My failure would validate his control, his vision, his way of life. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would not give him that satisfaction. I would succeed not despite his rejection, but because of it. 3 days later, I was sleeping on my best friend Maya's couch and working 2 jobs, morning shifts at a bakery and evening hours at a call center. Every spare minute went to planning my next move. I reached out to Cornell's financial aid office, explaining my situation. They offered additional loans and connected me with work-study opportunities, but it still wasn't enough. That's when I made the most difficult decision of my young life. I would defer my enrollment for 1 year. 1 year to save, to plan, to prove to myself and the world that Victor Chen's daughter could stand on her own. The year after being kicked out was the hardest of my life. It tested every ounce of determination I possessed. Maya's parents let me stay on their couch for 2 weeks before her mother gently explained they couldn't support another person long term. I didn't blame them. They had their own bills to pay, their own children to care for. With less than $150 left of my father's parting gift, I found a room in a cramped apartment with 3 other girls. The place was tiny, run down, and in a neighborhood my father would have forbidden me to even drive through. My room was barely larger than a closet, with a mattress on the floor and a small desk I'd salvaged from someone's curb. But it was mine, a space my father couldn't control. I kept both jobs and added weekend shifts at a local electronics repair shop. The owner, Mr. Jacobs, was a retired engineer who took pity on me after I fixed his point-of-sale system during a morning bakery shift. The repair shop became my sanctuary. While my roommates partied on weekends, I absorbed everything Mr. Jacobs could teach me about hardware. "You've got a natural talent for this," he told me one evening as I successfully diagnosed a complicated motherboard issue. "Why aren't you in school for it?" I explained my situation, the fight with my father, the deferred enrollment, the scramble to save enough money. Mr. Jacobs listened without interruption, then said something that changed the trajectory of my life. "Education isn't just found in classrooms, Olivia. While you're saving for college, I can teach you what 20 years in Silicon Valley taught me." For the next 6 months, I worked my regular jobs during the day and apprenticed under Mr. Jacobs in the evenings. He taught me hardware architecture, circuit design, and the business side of tech that no freshman computer science course would cover. More importantly, he believed in me, something I hadn't experienced since my mother died. One rainy Tuesday in November, Mr. Jacobs introduced me to a customer, Marcus Rivera, founder of a small but growing software company called Nexus Solutions. "This kid fixed your server issue," Mr. Jacobs told him. "Takes me twice as long to diagnose what she spots in minutes." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Really? What was the problem?" "Memory allocation error in the BIOS configuration," I answered confidently. "Your system was reading 32 GB installed, but only allocating 16 GB for operations. It was strangling your processing power." He looked impressed. "And you spotted that? Without diagnostics?" "The pattern of freezing followed by resource spikes is pretty distinctive," I shrugged. "I've seen it before." That brief conversation led to a part-time offer at Nexus. $18 an hour as a junior technician, with flexible hours around my other jobs. I accepted immediately. Within 3 months, I was working there full-time, having left both the bakery and call center behind. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At Nexus, I finally found what had been missing: a merit-based environment where results mattered more than pedigree or connections. Marcus became the mentor I'd been searching for, pushing me to develop my programming skills alongside my hardware knowledge. "The future is integration," he insisted. "People who understand both sides of the tech equation will be invaluable." I coded during the day and studied at night, determined to be prepared when I finally made it to Cornell. But as my bank account slowly grew and my skills developed at lightning speed, a new question began forming in my mind. Did I still need a traditional degree? A year after my father had thrown me out, I made a decision that would have horrified him. I formally declined my place at Cornell. Instead, I invested my savings in professional certifications and continued my practical education at Nexus. Marcus supported my decision. "College teaches theory. You're learning application. Both paths have value, but only one is putting money in your pocket right now." The next 3 years blurred together in a haze of 18-hour workdays, countless certification exams, and rapidly increasing responsibility at Nexus. By the time I turned 22, I was leading my own development team, focusing on machine learning applications for business intelligence. Exactly the field I'd told my father I wanted to pursue. My personal life was practically non-existent. I lived in a slightly better apartment but spent little time there. My few friends were all from work, people who shared my obsessive drive and technical interests. I dated occasionally, but relationships always took a back seat to my career. Some nights, exhausted after a coding marathon, I'd wonder if my father had been right about one thing. Was I sacrificing too much in pursuit of this dream? Those doubts always vanished by morning. With each promotion, each successful project, I was building evidence against my father's prediction of failure. I kept a journal tracking my achievements, not out of vanity, but as a shield against the voice in my head that sometimes sounded too much like him. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. Nexus had developed a revolutionary AI platform for predictive maintenance in manufacturing, software that could analyze machine performance and predict failures before they happened. The potential market was enormous, but we needed a partner, with the infrastructure and client base to scale quickly. That partner was Meridian Technologies, a well-established firm specializing in industrial automation systems. Marcus scheduled a presentation with their executive team, and I was selected to lead the technical portion of the pitch. "This is big, Olivia," Marcus warned me. "If we land this, Nexus becomes a major player overnight. If we don't, we will," I assured him, with more confidence than I felt. I spent weeks preparing, analyzing Meridian's existing systems, identifying integration points, and calculating potential ROI figures that would make their executives take notice. The night before the presentation, I rehearsed my slides one final time and went to bed feeling as ready as I could be. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian's impressive headquarters an hour early, dressed in the most professional outfit I could afford, a navy blue suit that had consumed an entire paycheck. As I set up in their sleek conference room, executives began filing in, introducing themselves with firm handshakes and measured smiles. I was reviewing my notes one last time, when the door opened and a familiar voice froze the blood in my veins. "Sorry I'm late. The traffic was—" The voice stopped abruptly. I looked up slowly, already knowing what I would see. Victor Chen, my father, staring at me with an expression of absolute shock. "Olivia?" he whispered, as though seeing a ghost. Struggled to maintain my composure, grateful for the years of practice hiding my emotions. "Mr. Chen," I replied, my voice miraculously steady. "I wasn't aware you worked for Meridian." The room had gone quiet, the other executives sensing the sudden tension without understanding its source. "I'm the senior systems director," he said, mechanically, still staring as though he couldn't quite believe I was real. 5 years had changed him. Gray now dominated his once black hair. Deep lines framed his eyes and mouth. He looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than the towering figure in my memories. "Shall we begin?" Marcus suggested, breaking the uncomfortable silence. I nodded, forcing myself to tear my gaze away from my father. With a deep breath, I launched into the presentation I'd rehearsed dozens of times, explaining Nexus's AI platform with clinical precision despite the earthquake happening inside me. Throughout my presentation, I avoided looking directly at my father, focusing instead on the other executives. But I could feel his eyes on me, watching, evaluating, perhaps finally seeing the success he'd declared impossible. When I finished the technical overview, the room erupted in questions, all of which I answered confidently, drawing on 4 years of hands-on experience. All except my father remained impressed and engaged. He sat silently, his expression unreadable, until the very end when Meridian's CEO turned to him. "Victor, you're our systems expert. What's your assessment?" All eyes turned to my father. I finally allowed myself to look directly at him, challenging him silently to evaluate me fairly, professionally, to separate the daughter he'd rejected from the expert now standing before him. The moment stretched, tension building as he opened his mouth to deliver his verdict. My father's expression remained impassive as the room waited for his assessment. When he finally spoke, his voice was detached and clinical. "The technology is sound," he stated flatly. "Integration with our existing systems would require significant resources, but the long-term benefits appear to justify the investment." Just facts. No recognition of who I was or what I'd accomplished. He evaluated the presentation as though I were any other vendor, a stranger pitching a product. Meridian's CEO, Lawrence Bennett, beamed. "Excellent. If Victor approves the technical aspects, I think we have the foundation for a partnership. Let's have our teams draw up the preliminary agreements." As the meeting concluded, executives filtered out of the room, leaving just me, Marcus, my father, and one of Meridian's VPs. Marcus was gathering our materials, oblivious to the tension radiating between me and my father. "Mr. Chen," the VP called out, "will you handle the technical liaison on this project?" My father hesitated, his eyes briefly meeting mine. "Perhaps someone else from my team would be better suited." "Nonsense," the VP replied. "You're our best systems architect. We need your expertise on this." A muscle in my father's jaw twitched, the only sign of emotion on his otherwise composed face. "Very well," he conceded. As Marcus and the VP stepped out to discuss logistics, I found myself alone with my father for the first time in 5 years. The silence between us stretched, heavy with unspoken words. "You've been with Nexus long?" he finally asked, his tone deliberately casual, as though speaking to a new acquaintance rather than his only child. 4 years, I replied evenly. "I started as a technician and worked my way up." He nodded stiffly. "And Cornell?" I declined their offer. His eyebrows rose slightly, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him. "I see." Another silence fell between us. I busied myself organizing my presentation materials, refusing to be the one to break it. After what seemed like an eternity, he spoke again. "You seem to have done adequately for yourself." Adequately. The word struck me like a physical blow. 5 years of working myself to exhaustion, of proving myself in a field dominated by men with prestigious degrees, of climbing from nothing to leading a major project, and the best he could offer was adequately. "I've done more than adequately," I replied, my voice tight. "I've excelled." "Without a degree," he pointed out. "There's a ceiling to how far you can go without proper credentials." The familiar dismissal reignited the anger I'd thought long extinguished. "I've gone further in 5 years than most people go in 15. I lead a development team of 12 engineers, most with advanced degrees. I've designed systems now being implemented by Fortune 500 companies, all without your precious proper credentials." His expression hardened. "And yet you're still just an employee pitching someone else's company. Where's the security in that? Where's the prestige? Is that all that matters to you? Security? Prestige? What about fulfillment? Innovation? Making something that matters? Naive?" He scoffed. "The world runs on stability and reputation." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You haven't changed at all, have you? Still measuring success by the same narrow metrics." "And you're still chasing fantasies," he countered. "Though I admit you've survived longer than I expected." "Survived?" I echoed incredulously. "I've thrived. I own my apartment. I have no debt. I lead cutting-edge projects that will revolutionize industrial technology, all by following the path you were so certain would lead to failure." "And what about family? Community? Balance?" he challenged. "Do you have any of those things, or have you sacrificed everything for this career you're so proud of?" His words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. I had friends, yes, but no close relationships, no real life outside of work. In running away from becoming what my father wanted, had I inadvertently become a different version of him, all ambition and achievement with nothing else to sustain me? Before I could formulate a response, Marcus returned with the VP, "Great news, Olivia," Marcus announced. "Meridian wants to fast-track this partnership. We'll start integration planning next week." I forced a smile, professional mask sliding back into place. "Wonderful. I'll assemble the team." My father nodded curtly to us both, then left without another word. As the door closed behind him, Marcus gave me a curious look. What was that about? "You and Chen seemed tense." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "We've crossed paths before." "Well, you'd better figure it out," Marcus advised. "He's going to be our primary contact for this project. Monthly meetings at minimum." The prospect of regularly facing my father sent a wave of anxiety through me. We'd have to work together, maintain a professional relationship despite the chasm of hurt and resentment between us. I wasn't sure if I could do it. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the business card my father had mechanically handed me before leaving. Victor Chen, Senior Systems Director. A direct phone number and email address were printed beneath his name. I turned the card over in my hands, debating whether to reach out, to clear the air before our professional relationship became more complicated. Pride won out. If he wanted to talk, he could contact me first. After all, he was the one who had thrown me out. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as our teams prepared for the integration project. I drove myself and my team harder than ever, determined to demonstrate unassailable competence when we next met with Meridian. If my father wanted to dismiss me as adequate, I would show him what excellence truly looked like. Our second meeting took place 3 weeks later. This time, my father was coldly professional, treating me exactly as he would any other vendor. He raised technical questions that proved he'd thoroughly studied our proposal, identifying potential issues that even I hadn't considered. I had to admit, grudgingly, that his expertise was impressive. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, he unexpectedly approached me. "Ms. Chen," he said formally, as though my last name were a coincidence rather than his own. "There are additional system architecture concerns I'd like to discuss. Are you available for dinner tomorrow evening?" The invitation caught me completely off guard. Was this strictly business, or was it his awkward attempt at reconciliation? "Is this a professional dinner or a personal one?" I asked bluntly. "Professional, of course," he replied stiffly. "The integration points between our legacy systems and your AI platform require further discussion." Of course. What had I expected? That 5 years and a successful career would suddenly make him acknowledge his mistakes? That he'd apologize for casting me out, for predicting my failure, for dismissing my chosen path? "I'll check my calendar," I said coolly. "I'll email you to confirm." That night, I agonized over the decision. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the professional distance that protected me from further hurt. Another part, the part that still remembered being his daughter, wanted to accept, hoping that behind the business pretext lay a desire to repair what had been broken. After hours of internal debate, I sent a terse email accepting the invitation. Whatever his motivations, I could handle one dinner. I'd faced far worse challenges in building my career from nothing. What I didn't know then was that this dinner would set in motion events that would irrevocably change both our lives, and place me in a position of power over the man who had once declared me powerless. I arrived at Nouveau, an upscale French restaurant in downtown Portland, 15 minutes early. The hostess showed me to a quiet corner table where my father was already waiting, dressed in a crisp gray suit that looked far more expensive than anything he'd worn when I lived at home. Success at Meridian had clearly treated him well financially. "You're early," he remarked as I took my seat. "I could say the same," I replied. It was a trait we shared, punctuality bordering on compulsion. An uncomfortable silence settled as we studied our menus. I chose the most expensive entree out of petty spite, though I knew I'd struggle to eat it with my stomach in knots. After ordering, my father pulled out a tablet and opened a technical schematic. "I've identified several potential compatibility issues between your AI system and our manufacturing controls." So it really was just business. I felt a complex mixture of relief and disappointment as I leaned forward to examine the diagrams. For the next 30 minutes, we discussed integration challenges and solutions, falling into the comfortable rhythm of technical problem solving. In this domain, at least, we spoke the same language. As the main course arrived, my father set the tablet aside. "Your understanding of our systems is impressive for someone who's only seen the documentation. I studied Meridian's architecture extensively before our first meeting, I explained. Your industrial control systems are considered benchmark in the industry. He nodded, looking almost pleased. I designed many of those systems myself. No, I admitted. Your name is on the architecture patents. I recognized it when I was researching. He looked surprised. You followed my work? I followed everyone's work in industrial systems. It was relevant to our project. I paused, then added, but yes, I was aware of your contributions. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, perhaps. And what did you think, professionally speaking? The binary decision tree for fault tolerance is elegant, I conceded. Most engineers would have built in redundancies that bloated the system. Your solution is efficient. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but the closest thing to it I'd seen. Efficient. Yes. Another silence fell, but this one felt less strained. We ate quietly until he cleared his throat. Your mother would have been proud of you. The words hit me like a physical blow. In 5 years, he had never once mentioned her to me. Don't, I said sharply. Don't bring her into this. Into what? He asked, seemingly genuinely confused. This pretense? This professional charade? I set down my fork with more force than necessary. We're not colleagues catching up over dinner. We're not friends discussing systems architecture. You're the father who threw me out with nothing, and I'm the daughter who survived despite your predictions of failure. He flinched almost imperceptibly. I was trying to pay you a compliment. By invoking Mom, the one person who always believed in me? Who encouraged my interest in technology before you decided law was the only acceptable path? Ellen never understood the practical realities of. She understood perfectly well, I cut him off. She just had different priorities, like happiness, like supporting her child's dreams instead of forcing her own agenda. My father's jaw tightened. You were 18. You had no concept of what the real world demanded. I was trying to guide you toward security, toward a respected profession. You weren't guiding me. You were dictating to me. There's a difference. And look where your path has led you, he said, gesturing vaguely. Living alone, working all hours, with nothing but professional achievements to show for it. Is that the life you envisioned when you defied me? His words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. I had sacrificed a personal life for professional success, but I refused to let him use that vulnerability against me. My life is exactly what I've chosen it to be, I replied evenly. Every step, every decision, mine. Not dictated by someone else's narrow definition of success. And are you happy, Olivia? He asked, his voice suddenly quieter. Truly, the question caught me off guard. Happy? Was I happy? I had professional fulfillment, financial security, the respect of my peers. But happiness? That seemed like a luxury I hadn't had time to pursue. I'm satisfied with what I've built, I answered, carefully. He nodded slowly, as though confirming something to himself. So am I. We lapsed into silence again as the server cleared our plates. My father ordered coffee. I declined, wanting this dinner to end as quickly as possible. I looked for you, he said suddenly, staring into his coffee cup rather than at me. About a year after you left, I went to Cornell. They told me you'd declined your place. I stared at him in disbelief. You went to Cornell? I thought. I assumed you'd have gone there despite everything. He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. When they said you weren't enrolled, I tried to find you, but you'd left no forwarding address. Your friends wouldn't tell me anything. Because I asked them not to, I said coldly. I didn't want to be found. I gathered that. Something that might have been regret flickered across his face. By the time I tracked down your apartment, you'd already moved. Twice. I sat in stunned silence, He had looked for me? After a year of silence, after throwing me out with nothing but dire predictions, a failure, he had tried to find me? Why? I finally asked. Why look for me at all? He set down his coffee cup, his hands not quite steady. Because I was wrong. 3 simple words I never thought I'd hear from Victor Chen, the man who built his identity on always being right. About what? I pressed, needing to hear him say it explicitly. About you, he admitted, his voice low. About your resilience, your capability. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but from my father, acknowledging he'd been wrong about anything was seismic. That doesn't change what you did, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It doesn't erase throwing me out with nothing. No, he agreed. It doesn't. We sat in, tense silence as he paid the bill, waving away my offer to split it. Outside the restaurant, the evening air was cool against my flushed face. The integration plan, my father said, reverting to professional mode. I'll have my team address the issues we discussed. I nodded, equally ready to retreat to safer ground. I'll do the same. As he turned to leave, he hesitated. Olivia, regardless of our personal history, I meant what I said about your work. It's impressive. Coming from him, this sterile professional acknowledgement was both gratifying and deeply inadequate. I wanted to demand more, a real apology, an admission of the damage he'd caused, some recognition of the girl who had cried herself to sleep in a strange apartment after being rejected by her only parent. Instead, I simply nodded. Again, good night, Mr. Chen. As I watched him walk away, I couldn't have known that our next meeting would occur under dramatically different circumstances. Circumstances that would fundamentally alter the power dynamic between us forever. The months following our uncomfortable dinner brought unexpected developments at Nexus. The partnership with Meridian exceeded all projections, with our AI systems seamlessly integrating into their manufacturing controls. What had begun as a limited implementation expanded into a company-wide rollout across Meridian's global operations. Marcus called me into his office one rainy afternoon in October. "Close the door," he said, his expression unusually serious. I complied, anxiety fluttering in my chest. Had something gone wrong with the Meridian project? The board just finished a 3-hour meeting, he began, leaning back in his chair. They've made some decisions I think you'll find interesting. I waited, mentally cataloging all the recent project milestones and potential issues. Nexus is going public, Marcus announced. IPO is scheduled for spring of next year. I blinked in surprise. We'd discussed this possibility, but I hadn't expected it to materialize so quickly. That's incredible, I said. Congratulations. It's not. Just my news to celebrate, Marcus smiled. The board has restructured the executive team in preparation. I'm moving to chairman, and we're creating a new COO position. My heart skipped a beat. And they want you for it. He slid a folder across his desk. Full equity package, executive, compensation, everything you've earned. I opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the offer letter inside. The salary figure made me momentarily dizzy. More money than I'd ever imagined earning, especially at 33. This is because of Meridian, I realized aloud. Marcus nodded. The partnership you architected has tripled our valuation. The board recognizes what I've known for years. You're the future of this company, Olivia. I stared at the offer letter, emotions washing over me in waves. Pride, vindication, and beneath it all, a small voice wondering what my father would think if he knew. Would he finally acknowledge that my path had been valid? Would it matter if he did? I need to think about it, I heard myself say. Marcus looked surprised. What's there to think about? This is everything you've been working toward. Was it? I wasn't sure anymore. The dinner with my father had unsettled something in me, forced me to question whether my single-minded pursuit of professional success had come at too great a personal cost. "Just give me the weekend," I requested. Marcus agreed, though reluctantly. I spent the next 48 hours in deep reflection, weighing not just the offer but the life I'd built, and the one I wanted moving forward. By Monday morning, I had my answer. I accepted the position with one condition: that I could build and lead my own team, handpicking talent that shared my vision for the future of AI in industrial applications. Marcus readily agreed. My first year as COO of Nexus was transformative. We successfully went public, with our IPO significantly oversubscribed. I assembled a diverse team of brilliant engineers and developers, many from non-traditional backgrounds like mine. Our partnership with Meridian continued to flourish, though I deliberately minimized my direct interactions with my father, delegating most communications to my team. Then came the news that would change everything again. "Have you heard the rumors about Meridian?" asked Diana, my VP of Strategic Partnerships, during our weekly meeting. I shook my head. "What rumors?" "Word is they're acquisition targets. Multiple suitors circling, including Global Tech." I frowned. Global Tech was known for buying companies, stripping them for valuable assets, and discarding the rest, including longtime employees. "Source?" I asked. "3 separate industry contacts," Diana replied, "and their stock has jumped 15%. This week on No News. Market clearly thinks something's happening. I mulled this over, considering the implications. If Meridian was acquired, particularly by Global Tech, our partnership could be jeopardized. The integration we'd spent 18 months perfecting might be dismantled if the new owners had different priorities. We need to get ahead of this, I decided. Schedule a meeting with their executive team. Frame it as a partnership review, but I want to feel out what's really happening. 2 days later, I sat in Meridian's boardroom facing their CEO, Lawrence Bennett, and his executive team, including my father, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Our quarterly numbers exceed projections by 22%, I reported, reviewing the successful implementation metrics. The AI system has reduced maintenance costs by 35%, while improving equipment uptime by nearly 40%. Lawrence nodded approvingly. "Extraordinary results. The board is extremely pleased with our partnership." "Pleased enough to maintain it regardless of organizational changes?" I asked, watching their reactions carefully. A tense silence fell. Lawrence and his CFO exchanged glances. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Lawrence said cautiously. "Industry rumors suggest Meridian might be considering new ownership structures," I replied evenly. "Nexus has significant resources invested in this partnership. We'd like assurances it remains a priority under any potential scenario." Lawrence looked troubled. "I can't comment on market speculation, Ms. Chen, but I assure you our commitment to the Nexus integration remains steadfast." "My life is exactly what I've chosen it to be," I replied evenly. "Every step, every decision, mine, not dictated by someone else's narrow definition of success." "And are you happy, Olivia?" he asked, his voice suddenly quieter. "Truly?" The question caught me off guard. Happy? Was I happy? I had professional fulfillment, financial security, the respect of my peers. But happiness? That seemed like a luxury I hadn't had time to pursue. "I'm satisfied with what I've built," I answered, carefully. He nodded slowly, as though confirming something to himself. "So am I." We lapsed into silence again as the server cleared our plates. My father ordered coffee. I declined, wanting this dinner to end as quickly as possible. "I looked for you," he said suddenly, staring into his coffee cup rather than at us. "About a year after you left, I went to Cornell. They told me you'd declined your place." I stared at him in disbelief. "You went to Cornell?" I assumed you'd have gone there despite everything." He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. "When they said you weren't enrolled, I tried to find you, but you'd left no forwarding address. Your friends wouldn't tell me anything. Because I asked. Them not to, I said coldly. I didn't want to be found. I gathered that. Something that might have been regret flickered across his face. By the time I tracked down your apartment, you'd already moved. Twice. I sat in stunned silence. He had looked for me? After a year of silence, after throwing me out with nothing but dire predictions of failure, he had tried to find me. Why? I finally asked. Why look for me at all? He set down his coffee cup, his hands not quite steady. Because I was wrong. 3 simple words I never thought I'd hear from Victor Chen, the man who built his identity on always being right. About what? I pressed, needing to hear him say it explicitly. About you, he admitted, his voice low. About your resilience, your capability. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but from my father, acknowledging he'd been wrong about anything was seismic. That doesn't change what you did, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It doesn't erase throwing me out with nothing. No, he agreed. It doesn't. We sat in tense silence as he paid the bill, waving away my offer to split it. Outside the restaurant, the evening air was cool against my flushed face. The integration plan, my father said, reverting to professional mode. I'll have my team address the issues we discussed. I nodded, equally ready to retreat to safer ground. I'll do the same. As he turned to leave, he hesitated. Olivia, regardless of our personal history, I meant what I said about your work. It's impressive. Coming from him, this sterile professional acknowledgement was both gratifying and deeply inadequate. I wanted to demand more, a real apology, an admission of the damage he'd caused, some recognition of the girl who had cried herself to sleep in a strange apartment after being rejected by her only parent. Instead, I simply nodded. Again. Good night, Mr. Chen. As I watched him walk away, I couldn't have known that our next meeting would occur under dramatically different circumstances, circumstances that would fundamentally alter the power dynamic between us forever. The months following our uncomfortable dinner brought unexpected developments at Nexus. The partnership with Meridian exceeded all projections, with our AI system seamlessly integrating into their manufacturing controls. What had begun as a limited implementation expanded into a company-wide rollout across Meridian's global operations. Marcus called me into his office one rainy afternoon in October. "Close the door," he said, his expression unusually serious. I complied, anxiety fluttering in my chest. Had something gone wrong with the Meridian project? The board just finished a 3-hour meeting, he began, leaning back in his chair. They've made some decisions I think you'll find interesting. I waited, mentally cataloging all the recent project milestones and potential issues. Nexus is going public, Marcus announced. IPO is scheduled for spring of next year. I blinked in surprise. We'd discussed this possibility, but I hadn't expected it to materialize so quickly. That's incredible, I said. Congratulations. It's not. Just my news to celebrate, Marcus smiled. The board has restructured the executive team in preparation. I'm moving to chairman, and we're creating a new COO position. My heart skipped a beat. And they want you for it. He slid a folder across his desk. Full equity package, executive. Compensation. Everything you've earned. I opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the offer letter inside. The salary figure made me momentarily dizzy, more money than I'd ever imagined earning, especially at 33. This is because of Meridian, I realized aloud. Marcus nodded. The partnership you architected has tripled our valuation. The board recognizes what I've known for years. You're the future of this company, Olivia. I stared at the offer letter, emotions washing over me in waves. Pride, vindication. And beneath it all, a small voice wondering what my father would think if he knew. Would he finally acknowledge that my path had been valid? Would it matter if he did? I need to think about it, I heard myself say. Marcus looked surprised. What's there to think about? This is everything you've been working toward. Was it? I wasn't sure anymore. The dinner with my father had unsettled something in me, forced me to question whether my single-minded pursuit of professional success had come at too great a personal cost. Just give me the weekend, I requested. Marcus agreed, though reluctantly. I spent the next 48 hours in deep reflection, weighing not just the offer but the life I'd built and the one I wanted moving forward. By Monday morning, I had my answer. I accepted the position with one condition: that I could build and lead my own team, handpicking talent that shared my vision for the future of AI in industrial applications. Marcus readily agreed. My first year as COO of Nexus was transformative. We successfully went public, with our IPO significantly oversubscribed. I assembled a diverse team of brilliant engineers and developers, many from non-traditional backgrounds like mine. Our partnership with Meridian continued to flourish, though I deliberately minimized my direct interactions with my father, delegating most communications to my team. Then came the news that would change everything again. Have you heard the rumors? About Meridian? Asked Diana, my VP of Strategic Partnerships, during our weekly meeting. I shook my head. What rumors? Word is their acquisition targets, multiple suitors circling, including Global Tech. I frowned. Global Tech was known for buying companies, stripping them for valuable assets, and discarding the rest, including longtime employees. Source? I asked. 3 separate industry contacts, Diana replied. And their stock has jumped 15%. This week on No News. Market clearly thinks something's happening. I mulled this over, considering the implications. If Meridian was acquired, particularly by Global Tech, our partnership could be jeopardized. The integration we'd spent 18 months perfecting might be dismantled if the new owners had different priorities. We need to get ahead of this, I decided. Schedule a meeting with their executive team. Frame it as a partnership review, but I want to feel out what's really happening. 2 days later, I sat in Meridian's boardroom facing their CEO, Lawrence Bennett, and his executive team, including my father, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Our quarterly numbers exceed projections by 22%, I reported. Reviewing the successful implementation metrics, the AI system has reduced maintenance costs by 35%, while improving equipment uptime by nearly 40%. Lawrence nodded approvingly. Extraordinary results. The board is extremely pleased with our partnership. Pleased enough to maintain it regardless of organizational changes? I asked, watching their reactions carefully. A tense silence fell. Lawrence and his CFO exchanged glances. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Lawrence said cautiously. Industry rumors suggest Meridian might be considering new ownership structures, I replied evenly. Nexus has significant resources invested in this partnership. We'd like assurances it remains a priority under any potential scenario. Lawrence looked troubled. I can't comment on market speculation, Ms. Chen, but I assure you our commitment to the Nexus integration remains steadfast. My father hadn't spoken, but I noticed his jaw tightening, a telltale sign of stress I remembered from childhood. After the meeting, as I gathered my materials, my father approached. A word, please, he requested quietly. I followed him to a small, empty conference room. Once the door closed, his professional demeanor slipped. How much do you know? He asked bluntly. Enough to be concerned, I replied. Global Tech, he nodded grimly. Among others. Lawrence is fighting it, but several board members are pushing for a sale. And if it happens? My father's shoulders sagged slightly. Global Tech has made it clear they're primarily interested in Meridian's patent portfolio and client base. The rest? Would be expendable, I finished for him, including 25-year veterans like yourself. For the first time since our reunion, I saw genuine vulnerability in his expression. At 58, he was facing the prospect of being discarded by the company he'd helped build, just as he had once discarded me. I have options, he said stiffly, but we both knew the reality for tech executives his age. The industry's ageism was an open secret. I made a split-second decision that would alter both our futures. What if there was another option for Meridian? I suggested. A different buyer? He looked at me skeptically. Like who? Like Nexus. His eyes widened. That's not possible. Nexus doesn't have that kind of capital even after your IPO. We could with the right backing, I countered. Our stock is strong. We have investor confidence. And we already understand Meridian's technology better than anyone else. My father studied me intensely, as though seeing me in a new light. You're serious. Perfectly serious. A merger would preserve the integration we've built, protect Meridian's core operations, and create a tech powerhouse that could compete globally. I paused. It would also preserve jobs that might otherwise be eliminated in a global tech acquisition, including his. My father was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Lawrence might be receptive, he finally said. He's desperate for alternatives. Then pave the way for a meeting, I replied. CEO to CEO. I'll handle the rest. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Olivia, why would you do this? I paused at the door, considering my answer carefully. Was it purely business strategy? A desire to protect our successful partnership? Or was it something more complicated? A chance to prove something to the man who had once deemed me a failure? Because it makes financial and strategic sense, I answered, choosing the simplest truth among many. And because sometimes people deserve second chances. I left him standing there, knowing I had just set in motion events that would either heal our broken relationship or shatter it beyond repair. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. After my conversation with my father, I presented the acquisition idea to Marcus and our board. Initial skepticism quickly gave way to strategic excitement as they recognized the potential synergies between our companies. Meridian's hardware expertise combined with our AI capabilities could redefine industrial technology, I argued during our emergency board meeting. Instead of just being their vendor, we could create truly integrated systems from the ground up. Our CFO raised the most obvious concern. The capital requirements would be substantial. Meridian's market cap is nearly 4 times ours, which is why we're exploring a structured deal, I explained. Part cash, part stock exchange, with key investment partners already expressing interest. By already expressing interest, I meant the 3 calls I'd made immediately after leaving Meridian, to venture capitalists who had been trying to invest in Nexus since before our IPO. I had rejected their offers then, preferring to maintain our independence. Now I needed their resources. 2 of them agreed to back our play within 48 hours. The third joined a day later after reviewing our combined valuation projections. With their support secured, we arranged a formal meeting with Meridian's leadership. Lawrence. Bennett listened to our proposal with increasing interest. This is unexpected, he admitted, but intriguing. We're offering fair market value, I emphasized, with a structure that preserves Meridian's core operations and provides leadership continuity. Unlike Global Tech's strip mining approach, Lawrence nodded grimly. My father remained silent throughout most of the presentation, speaking only when technical questions arose. His face revealed nothing, but I could sense his unease. This scenario, his daughter potentially becoming his boss, couldn't have featured in even his worst nightmares. After 3 weeks of intense negotiations, due diligence, and sleepless nights, we signed the preliminary agreement. Nexus would acquire Meridian Technologies in a deal valued at $2.8 billion, creating Nexus Meridian, a new industrial technology powerhouse. The announcement sent both companies' stocks soaring. The Dow. Integration planning began immediately. As the architect of the deal, I was named CEO of the combined entity. Lawrence would retire with a generous package, while other Meridian executives would be evaluated for roles in the new organization, including my father. I assigned the executive assessment process to an independent consulting firm to avoid any appearance of bias, either for or against him. The irony wasn't lost on me. 15 years ago, he had judged me unworthy and cast me out. Now, strangers would evaluate his worthiness to remain in the company that had once been his professional. 2 months after the deal announcement, I received the consultant's reports on Meridian's executive team. Most assessments were straightforward. Some leaders would stay in similar roles, others would be offered severance. My father's evaluation was more complicated. Victor Chen possesses exceptional technical knowledge and institutional memory, the report concluded. However, concerns exist about his adaptability to the more collaborative culture of Nexus Meridian. Recommended action: transition to senior technical advisor role with reduced operational authority. A demotion, essentially. Not termination, but a significant step down from his current directorship. The decision was now mine to make. I sat in my new corner office staring at his file. The professional choice was clear: accept the recommendation and move him to an advisory position. But this wasn't just a professional decision. This was personal in ways no business school case study could capture. Part of me, the wounded 18-year-old who had sobbed on Maya's couch, wanted him to experience the powerlessness he had once inflicted on me. Another part, the successful executive I had become, recognized his technical value to the organization regardless of our history. After hours of internal debate, I made my decision. I would meet with him personally to discuss his future, something no other Meridian executive would receive. Whether this was professional courtesy or personal reckoning, I wasn't entirely sure. I scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon in the company's executive boardroom, neutral territory that belonged fully to neither Nexus nor Meridian, but to the new combined entity we were creating. My father arrived precisely on time, dressed immaculately as always. If he was nervous, only the slight tightness around his eyes betrayed it. "Please sit," I gestured to the chair across from me. Between us lay the consultant's report, closed but unmistakable in its significance. "I assume that's my evaluation," he said evenly. I nodded. "It is." "And?" His voice remained steady, but his fingers tapped once against his knee. Another tell I remembered from childhood. He was anxious. "The consultants have recommended transitioning you to a senior technical advisor role," I said, matching his professional tone. "Reduced operational responsibilities, but leveraging your technical expertise and institutional knowledge." He absorbed this information silently, his expression carefully neutral. "I see. However," I continued, "I'm not obligated to follow. Their recommendation," a flicker of something, hope, fear, crossed his face. "Meaning?" "Meaning I have 3 options. I can accept their recommendation, I can reject it in favor of maintaining your current position, or I can reject it in favor of a separation package." I met his gaze directly. "The decision is mine." The weight of this role reversal hung heavy between us. 15 years ago, he had held absolute power over my future and had chosen to cast me out. Now I held similar power over his professional fate. "What factors will inform your decision?" he asked carefully. "Professional considerations primarily," I replied. "Your technical capabilities are unquestionable. Your ability to adapt to our more collaborative culture is less certain." "And personal considerations?" he ventured, addressing the elephant in the room. I took a measured breath. "I've worked very hard to keep those separate from this process." It's why I assigned the evaluations to an independent firm. Yet here we are, having a private meeting that no other Meridian executive has been granted, he observed. Yes, I acknowledged. Here we are. Silence stretched between us, laden with 15 years of unresolved history. What would you do in my position? I finally asked. The question surprised us both. My father considered this carefully. If our positions were reversed, he paused, looking momentarily vulnerable. I would do what benefits the company most, regardless of our history. That's not what you did 15 years ago, I pointed out. You put your personal agenda above what might have been best for me. Yes, he admitted quietly. I did. Another silence fell, broken only by the soft hum of the building's air conditioning. The consultant's recommendation is professionally sound, I finally said. Your technical knowledge is invaluable, but your management style is inconsistent with our vision moving forward. He nodded stiffly, accepting the verdict. However, I continued, I'm amending their recommendation. Instead of a pure advisory role, I'm creating a new position, Chief Technical Architect. You'll lead our long-term technology roadmap development, reporting directly to me. His eyes widened slightly. That's more responsibility than the consultant suggested. It is, I agreed, because their assessment, while thorough, missed something important about you. Which is? Your capacity to adapt when necessary, I said. You survived in tech for over 30 years because underneath that rigid exterior, you're actually quite capable of change when it serves a greater purpose. For the first time in our adult relationship, I saw genuine surprise on my father's face. Thank you, he said simply. Don't thank me yet, I cautioned. The role comes with conditions, weekly progress reports, regular collaboration with teams you've previously kept at arm's length, and quarterly performance reviews with me personally. He nodded slowly. Understood. As he stood to leave, I added, One more thing, Victor. Using his first name felt strange but necessary, establishing our new professional dynamic. Yes? This position is not charity or sentiment. It's a business decision. Prove it was the right one. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I will. As the door closed behind him, I sat back in my chair, emotionally exhausted, but strangely unburdened. I had faced my past without being consumed by it. I had made a decision that served both the company and my own complex feelings about the man who had shaped me, for better and worse. The hard work of building Nexus Meridian was just beginning. And somewhere in that process, perhaps my father and I would build something else too, understanding, if not forgiveness. The first 6 months of Nexus Meridian's existence tested every leadership skill I possessed. Merging two distinct corporate cultures proved even more challenging than the financial and technical aspects of the acquisition. Nexus employees, accustomed to our collaborative, flexible approach, chafed under Meridian's more structured processes. Meanwhile, Meridian veterans viewed our Nexus methods as chaotic and undisciplined. I found myself constantly mediating between the factions, searching for the right balance that would preserve the strengths of both organizations while creating something greater than the sum of its parts. My father, to his credit, embraced his new role with unexpected adaptability. His first quarterly technology roadmap presentation impressed even the most skeptical Nexus engineers. He had clearly studied our development philosophy, incorporating its emphasis on flexibility and iteration, while maintaining Meridian's rigorous testing standards. The chief technical architect has exceeded initial performance expectations, I noted in his first quarterly review, particularly in cross-team collaboration initiatives. My father nodded at the assessment, his expression carefully neutral. I found the collaborative approach has merits I hadn't fully appreciated previously. It was as close as he would come to admitting he'd been wrong about something. Our professional relationship settled into a cautious rhythm: weekly progress meetings, project update emails, occasional technical consultations, all conducted with a scrupulous formality that acknowledged our complicated history without directly addressing it. Until the Reynolds crisis changed everything. Reynolds Manufacturing was our largest client post-merger, accounting for nearly 20% of annual revenue. When their CEO called me directly on a Sunday morning, I knew something was seriously wrong. "We're experiencing catastrophic system failures across all production facilities," he reported, his voice tense with barely contained panic. "Every plant using the integrated Nexus Meridian system has shut down simultaneously." My blood ran cold. "How long have they been offline?" 3 hours and counting. "We're losing millions by the minute." I immediately activated our emergency response team, but instinct told me we needed our most experienced system architect. I called my father. "I need you at headquarters immediately," I said without preamble. "Reynolds is down. Complete system failure." To his credit, he asked no questions. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The Situation Room was already buzzing with engineers when he arrived. I quickly briefed him on what we knew. The failure appeared related to a recent software update, but the specifics remained elusive. Every diagnostic attempt had failed to identify the root cause. "Let me see the logs," my father requested, immediately taking a seat at one of the terminals. For the next 4 hours, we worked side by side, sifting through mountains of data, testing hypotheses, and deploying potential fixes that ultimately failed. The pressure mounted with each passing hour as Reynolds' losses accumulated. Around hour 5, my father suddenly straightened. "Wait, look at this timestamp sequence." I leaned over his shoulder, studying the pattern he'd identified. The authentication. Handshake is failing, but only after it initially succeeds. "Exactly," he nodded. "It's like the systems recognize each other, then reject the connection. Like an immune response," I murmured. Our eyes met in sudden understanding. "The security protocol," we said in unison. "Meridian's legacy security system is misinterpreting Nexus commands as intrusion attempts," my father explained to the team. "After allowing initial contact, it's activating emergency lockdown procedures." "But why now?" I questioned. "The integration has been running for months." My father was already typing furiously. "The latest update changed how we handle authentication. Tokens. To Meridian security protocols, it looks like a man-in-the-middle attack." Within 30 minutes, he had crafted a patch that would resolve the authentication conflict. I reviewed his code, suggested 2 minor modifications, and together, we implemented the fix across Reynolds' network. One by one, the plants came back online. By midnight, all systems were functioning normally. The Reynolds CEO called to express profound relief and gratitude. As the emergency team dispersed, my father and I found ourselves alone in the conference room, the adrenaline of crisis management finally ebbing. "We make a good team," I said quietly, surprising both of us with the admission. He looked up from shutting down his laptop. "Yes," he agreed after a moment. "We do." Something shifted between us in that moment, a small but significant crack in the wall of formality we'd maintained. "Since the acquisition, would you like to get some coffee?" I found myself asking. "There's an all-night diner across the street." He hesitated, then nodded. "I could use the caffeine." The diner was nearly empty at 1 a.m., just a few night shift workers and the occasional insomniac. We claimed a booth by the window, ordering coffee and pie almost as an afterthought. "That was impressive troubleshooting," I acknowledged after the waitress left. "Most people would have needed much longer to identify that pattern." "I designed the original security protocol," he admitted. "Its aggressiveness was actually a flaw I never fully addressed. A flaw that saved Meridian from 3 different cyber attacks," I pointed out, having read the security incident reports during due diligence. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sometimes our weaknesses and strengths are the same thing, just in different contexts. The observation hung between us, laden with significance beyond systems architecture. "Do you remember when I was 12? I said suddenly. "And I took apart your computer to upgrade the RAM?" He looked startled by the shift in conversation. "You didn't just upgrade the RAM. You modified the entire cooling system using parts from your mother's old hairdryer." "You were so angry," I recalled. "You said I could have destroyed your work files." "I was angry," he acknowledged, "but also impressed, though I never told you that." "You never told me a lot of things," I said softly. He stared down at his coffee. "No, I didn't." Another silence fell, but this one felt different, less defensive, more contemplative. "When your mother died," he said finally, "I was lost. Ellen understood you in ways I never did. She knew how to balance my rigidity, how to nurture your creativity without letting it become undisciplined. Without her," he trailed off. "You doubled down on control," I finished for him. He nodded slowly. "I thought structure would protect you. Rules, clear paths, no room for the kind of risks that could lead to disappointment or failure. But life isn't structured that way," I said, "and neither is innovation." "No," he agreed. "They're not. I learned that lesson too late to be the father you deserved." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever expected. I sipped my coffee, letting his words settle between us. "Why did you really give me the chief technical architect position?" he asked suddenly. The truth. I considered deflecting but decided on honesty instead. "Because despite everything, you're brilliant at what you do. And because—" I paused, searching for the right words. "Because I wanted to prove something, to myself more than to you." "What?" "That I could make decisions based on merit rather than emotion. That I'm not defined by what happened between us 15 years ago." He studied me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "You've built something remarkable, Olivia. Not just Nexus Meridian. Yourself." The compliment, simple but sincere, touched something deep within me. A place that had been waiting for his recognition since I was a child, bringing home perfect test scores. "We should do this again," I found myself saying as we prepared to leave. "Not just during crises." He looked surprised, then cautiously pleased. "I'd like that." As we walked back toward the office building where our cars were parked, I realized something important. The success I'd pursued so relentlessly had finally brought me face to face with my past. But instead of the vindication I'd imagined, I was finding something more valuable, the possibility of healing. Whether that healing would continue remained uncertain. But for the first time in 15 years, I was open to finding out. 3 months after the Reynolds crisis, Nexus Meridian had settled into a more cohesive operation. The merger's initial turbulence had subsided as employees found their place in the new organization. My father and I had established a tentative rhythm of weekly coffee meetings, still primarily professional, but occasionally venturing into more personal territory. During one such meeting at our now regular diner booth, he surprised me by bringing a small package. "This arrived at my apartment yesterday," he explained, sliding it across the table. "It's addressed to you." I frowned at the unfamiliar handwriting. "Why would something for me come to your address?" "It's from Ellen's sister, your Aunt Sarah." Froze. Aunt Sarah had been my mother's only sibling, a free-spirited artist who had traveled constantly after my mother's death. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade. "How did she know to send it to you?" I asked, turning the package over in my hands. "We've stayed in touch," my father admitted. "She calls a few times a year, mostly on your mother's birthday or the anniversary of her passing." I blinked in surprise. My father had never mentioned this continued connection to my mother's family. Does she know about me? About what happened? He nodded slowly. She knows we became estranged. Not all the details. With slightly unsteady hands, I opened the package. Inside was a small wooden box and a handwritten note. Dear Olivia, it began. I recently came across these items while clearing out my storage unit. They were among your mother's personal effects that I kept after her passing. I thought you should have them. With love, Aunt Sarah. I opened the box carefully. Inside lay a collection of items. A delicate silver bracelet I remembered my mother wearing on special occasions. A small notebook bound in faded blue leather, and a USB drive labeled simply, For Olivia. Did you know about these? I asked my father. He shook his head. Sarah took some of Ellen's personal items after the funeral. I never asked what they were. It was too painful at the time. I lifted out the notebook first. It was my mother's journal, filled with her flowing handwriting. Flipping through, I saw entries dating back to before my birth, continuing until just weeks before her final hospitalization. I can't read this here, I said quietly, closing the journal. The emotions it evoked were too raw for a public setting. My father nodded in understanding. Would you like to postpone our meeting? No, I decided after a moment. But I think I'll need some time this weekend to go through these properly. He hesitated, then asked, Would you let me know if there's anything I should see? Anything Ellen would have wanted me to know? The vulnerability in his request caught me off guard. Of course, I promised. That weekend, I cleared my calendar and settled into my apartment with the items from my mother. The bracelet I placed carefully on my nightstand, a tangible connection to her I hadn't expected to receive. The journal? I approached with both eagerness and trepidation. The earliest entries detailed her life before meeting my father, her art studies, her dreams of opening a gallery, her travels through Europe. Then came entries about meeting Victor Chen, a brilliant but serious engineering student who sees the world in such fascinating patterns. I read for hours, absorbing my mother's thoughts, her hopes, her fears. She wrote about her pregnancy with me, her joy at my birth, her observations of my early development. Olivia takes apart her toys to see how they work, she noted when I was barely 4. Victor says she has an engineer's mind. I think she has an artist's curiosity. As I continued, reading, a more complex picture emerged. My mother had struggled with my father's rigidity, his insistence on structure and achievement. But she had also deeply respected his intellect and principles. Their relationship, through her eyes, seemed built on genuine love, complicated by fundamentally different worldviews. Then came the entries about her illness. The diagnosis came today, she wrote. Stage 3, already spread to the lymph nodes. Victor tried to hide his fear, but I saw it in his eyes. He immediately began researching treatments, specialists, survival rates. It's how he copes, finding patterns, seeking control. I worry about how he'll handle things that can't be controlled, especially with Olivia. She's so much like me, intuitive, creative, following her heart. He doesn't understand that kind of thinking, though he tries. For my sake. Later entries grew shorter as her illness progressed, but one particular passage from her final months caught my attention. Spoke with Victor about Olivia's future today. He's already planning her path, top universities, prestigious career. I tried to explain that she needs to find her own way, that her passion for technology comes from genuine curiosity, not a desire for status or security. He listened, but I'm not sure he truly heard. I worry that without me to mediate, they'll clash terribly. Both so brilliant, both so stubborn. I've made him promise to let her follow her dreams, whatever they may be. He agreed, but I saw the reservation in his eyes. He believes he knows what's best for her. I hope someday he'll understand that what's best is letting her decide for herself. Tears blurred my vision as I read her final entry, dated just 2 weeks before she passed away. Too weak to write much now. Made videos for Olivia, for her graduation, her wedding day, moments I won't get to share. Victor promised to give them to her when the time is right. I hope they help her know how much I loved her, how proud I am of the woman she'll become. My greatest regret is not seeing that woman. My greatest hope is that she'll be true to herself, always. Videos. The USB drive. With trembling hands, I connected it to my laptop. It contained a folder labeled, "For Olivia's Milestones." Inside were half a dozen video files with names like high school graduation, college graduation, wedding day, and when you need guidance. I clicked on high school graduation first. My mother's face filled the screen, thinner than I remembered, clearly filmed during her illness, but smiling with the warmth I had never forgotten. "My darling Olivia," she began, "if you're watching this, you've just graduated high school. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to see you in your cap and gown, to embarrass you with too many photos and tears of pride. But I am proud, so incredibly proud, of the young woman you've become." I watched in stunned silence as she continued, offering advice for my college years, sharing her hopes for my future, telling me how much she loved me. The video ended with her blowing a kiss to the camera, her eyes bright with unshed tears. These were the messages my father had promised to give me, messages I had never received. I sat motionless, emotions warring within me. Grief for my mother, renewed and raw. Anger that these videos had been withheld from me. Confusion about why my father had broken his promise to her. The next morning I called him. "I need to see you," I said without preamble. "It's about what was on the USB drive." There was a brief silence. "I'll come to your apartment," he offered. "Would an hour from now work?" Yes. When he arrived, I could see the apprehension in his eyes. Without speaking, I gestured to my laptop, where my mother's graduation message was queued up. "You never gave me these," I said simply. He stared at the frozen image of my mother on the screen, his face pale. "No," he admitted. "I didn't. She trusted you to give them to me. You promised her." "I did," he acknowledged, his voice barely audible. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you keep these from me?" He sank heavily onto my couch, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. The first few years after she died, I couldn't bear to watch them myself. The thought of seeing her, hearing her voice. He shook his head. It was too painful. "And later?" I pressed. "Later, I convinced myself you were too young, that the videos would only reopen wounds that had begun to heal." He paused. "By the time you were in high school, our relationship had become so rigid. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that her words would contradict mine. Afraid that her encouragement for you to follow your own path would undermine the future I'd planned for you." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "I was wrong, Olivia. So terribly wrong." I stared at him, struggling to process this admission. "She asked you to let me follow my dreams. She made you promise." "Yes," he nodded. "And then she died. And I was so afraid of making the wrong decisions that I doubled down on what I knew. Structure, security, clear paths to success. I couldn't see that I was breaking my promise to her every day. Until I left," I said quietly. "Until you left," he agreed. "By then, giving you the videos seemed impossible. How could I explain why I'd kept them from you? How could I face your anger, your disappointment? So I locked them away, literally and figuratively." "She wanted me to have them," I said, pain evident in my voice. "They were her parting gift to me, and you took that away." "I know," he whispered. "Of all the mistakes I've made, That might be the one I regret most deeply. We sat in heavy silence, the weight of his confession filling the room. I'd like to watch them now, I finally said. All of them. He nodded and stood to leave, assuming I wanted privacy. Stay, I said, surprising us both. Watch them with me. He froze, uncertainty etched on his face. Are you sure? She was your wife, I said simply. You should hear what she had to say too. Slowly, he sat back down. Together, we watched as Ellen Chen, 15 years gone but suddenly present, shared her wisdom, her humor, her love, with both of us. In each video, she spoke directly to me, but occasionally mentioned my father. Your dad will struggle with this, she said in one, discussing college choices. He believes security comes from conventional paths, but he loves you more than anything. Olivia, remember that even when you disagree. When the final video ended, we sat in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. She knew we would clash, my father finally said. She understood us both so well. Yes, I agreed softly. She did. I failed her, he continued. Failed you both. I considered his words carefully. You made serious mistakes, I acknowledged, but you weren't entirely wrong about everything. The discipline you instilled in me, the drive for excellence, those things served me well, even if your methods were flawed. He looked up, surprised by this concession. I think, I continued slowly, that what we both needed was balance. Her balance. Without it, we both went to extremes. You toward rigid control, me toward proving I could succeed without you. And now? He asked. It was a loaded question about our professional relationship, our personal relationship, our future. Now, I said, we try to find that balance for ourselves, together, if possible. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was an opening, a chance to build something new from the ruins of what had been broken 15 years ago. As he left my apartment that day, he turned back briefly. Thank you for letting me see her again, he said simply. I nodded, unable to find words for the complex emotions swirling within me. But for the first time since our reunion, I felt something shift fundamentally between us. Something that felt, cautiously, like the beginning of healing. 3 months after the Reynolds crisis, Nexus Meridian had settled into a more cohesive operation. My father and I had established a tentative rhythm of weekly coffee meetings, still primarily professional but occasionally venturing into more personal territory. During one such meeting at our now regular diner booth, he surprised me by bringing a small package. This arrived at my apartment yesterday, he explained, sliding it across the table. It's addressed to you. I frowned at the unfamiliar handwriting. Why would something for me come to your address? It's from Ellen's sister, your Aunt Sarah. Froze. Aunt Sarah had been my mother's only sibling, a free-spirited artist who had traveled constantly after my mother's death. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade. How did she know to send it to you? I asked, turning the package over in my hands. We've stayed in touch, my father admitted. She calls a few times a year, mostly on your mother's birthday, or the anniversary of her passing. With slightly unsteady hands, I opened the package. Inside was a small wooden box and a handwritten note from Aunt Sarah explaining these were my mother's personal effects she'd kept after her passing. The box contained a delicate silver bracelet. I remembered my mother wearing on special occasions, a small notebook bound in faded blue leather, and a USB drive labeled simply, for Olivia. Did you know about these? I asked my father. He shook his head. Sarah took some of Ellen's personal items after the funeral. I never asked what they were. It was too painful at the time. That weekend, I cleared my calendar and settled into my apartment with the items from my mother. The journal contained entries dating back to before my birth, continuing until just weeks before her final hospitalization. I read for hours, absorbing my mother's thoughts, her hopes, her fears. She wrote about her pregnancy with me, her joy at my birth, her observations of my early development. Olivia takes apart her toys to see how they work, she noted when I was barely 4. Victor says she has an engineer's mind. I think she has an artist's curiosity. As I continued reading, a more complex picture emerged. My mother had struggled with my father's rigidity, but she had also deeply respected his intellect and principles. Their relationship, through her eyes, seemed built on genuine love, complicated by fundamentally different worldviews. Then came the entries about her illness and a particular passage from her final months. Spoke with Victor about Olivia's future. Today. He's already planning her path, top universities, prestigious career. I tried to explain that she needs to find her own way, that her passion for technology comes from genuine curiosity, not a desire for status or security. I've made him promise to let her follow her dreams, whatever they may be. He agreed, but I saw the reservation in his eyes. Her final entry, dated just 2 weeks before she passed, mentioned videos she'd made for me, for my graduation, wedding, day, and other milestones I wouldn't get to share with her. Videos my father had promised to give me when the time was right. With trembling hands, I connected the USB drive to my laptop. It contained files labeled high school graduation, college, graduation, wedding day, and when you need guidance. I clicked on high school graduation first. My mother's face filled the screen, thinner than I remembered, clearly filmed during her illness, but smiling with warmth. "My darling Olivia," she began, "if you're watching this, you've just graduated. High school. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to see you in your cap and gown, but I am proud, so incredibly proud, of the young woman you've become." These were the messages my father had promised to give me, messages I had never received. The next morning, I called him. When he arrived at my apartment, I gestured to my laptop, where my mother's message was queued up. "You never gave me these," I said simply. He stared at the frozen image of my mother, his face pale. "No, I didn't. She trusted you to give them to me. You promised her." "I did," he acknowledged, his voice barely audible. "Why?" I demanded. He sank heavily onto my couch. "The first few years after she died, I couldn't bear to watch them myself. It was too painful." "And later?" "Later, I convinced myself you were too young. By the time you were in high school, our relationship had become so rigid. I was afraid her words would contradict mine, that her encouragement for you to follow your own path would undermine the future I'd planned. She asked you to let me follow my dreams. She made you promise." "Yes," he nodded. "And then she died, and I was so afraid of making the wrong decisions that I doubled down on what I knew: structure, security, clear paths to success. I couldn't see that I was breaking my promise to her every day. Until I left," I said quietly. "Until you left?" he agreed. "By then, giving you the videos seemed impossible. I'd like to watch them now," I finally said. "All of them." He nodded and stood to leave, assuming I wanted privacy. "Stay," I said, surprising us both. "Watch them with me." Together, we watched as Ellen Chen, 15 years gone but suddenly present, shared her wisdom and love. In each video, she spoke directly to me, but occasionally mentioned my father. "Your dad will struggle with this," she said in one. "He believes security comes from conventional paths. But he loves you more than anything, Olivia. Remember that, even when you disagree." When the final video ended, we sat in silence. "She knew we would clash," my father finally said. "She understood us both so well." "Yes," I agreed softly. "She did." "I failed her," he continued. Failed you both. You made serious mistakes, I acknowledged. But you weren't entirely wrong about everything. The discipline you instilled in me served me well, even if your methods were flawed. And now? He asked. Now we try to find balance for ourselves. Together, if possible. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was an opening, a chance to build something new from the ruins of what had been broken 15 years ago. 6. Months after discovering my mother's videos, Nexus Meridian had grown into a formidable presence in the tech industry. Our stock price had doubled since the acquisition, and industry analysts regularly cited us as a case study in successful corporate mergers. The relationship between my father and me had evolved as well. Our weekly coffee meetings had expanded to occasional dinners, where our conversations increasingly ventured beyond work into more personal territory. We weren't close. 15 years of estrangement couldn't be erased in a matter of months. But we had established a tentative peace until the global tech proposition threatened to upend everything. Lawrence Bennett, Meridian's former CEO and now a board member of Nexus Meridian, requested an urgent meeting. When I arrived at his office, he wasn't alone. Seated beside him was Philip Alderman, CEO of Global Tech, the same company that had tried to acquire Meridian before our intervention. Olivia, Lawrence greeted me. I believe you know Philip. By reputation, I replied coolly, shaking the older man's hand. Global Tech was known for aggressive acquisitions and ruthless cost-cutting. Everything we had tried to avoid with our Meridian merger. Mr. Alderman has an interesting proposal, Lawrence explained. I thought you should hear it directly. Philip smiled, all perfect teeth and practiced charm. Global Tech would like to acquire Nexus Meridian. We're prepared to offer a 50% premium over your current stock price. I kept my expression neutral despite my shock. That's certainly generous. May I ask why? Your AI integration technology. It's years ahead of anything else on the market. We could scale it across our entire portfolio of manufacturing clients. I see, I replied carefully. And what would happen to our current operations? Our employees? There would be some restructuring, of course, Philip said smoothly. Elimination of redundancies, standard procedure. Translation, mass layoffs, particularly of former Meridian employees deemed obsolete by global tech standards. I appreciate the interest, I said. This would require extensive discussion with our board and leadership team. Of course, Philip nodded. We're prepared to give you 48 hours for preliminary discussions before making a formal offer. After he left, Lawrence turned to me anxiously. This could be extremely lucrative for shareholders. And devastating for our employees, I countered. You know Global Tech's playbook, Lawrence. They'll strip the company for parts. The board will want to consider it seriously, he warned. Fiduciary duty and all that. I spent the rest of the day in a state of controlled panic, running financial models and considering options. By evening, I had called an emergency meeting of our executive team, including my father. Global Tech wants to acquire us, I announced bluntly once everyone had assembled. They're offering a 50% premium. Murmurs rippled through the room. My father's expression darkened, but he remained silent. They'd dismantle everything we've built, our CFO said. Their track record is clear. But the offer price is extraordinary, noted our head of investor relations. The board may feel compelled to consider it. Unless we have an alternative, I replied. I took a deep breath and outlined the plan I'd spent the afternoon formulating. A management-led buyout that would take Nexus Meridian private, protecting it from hostile takeovers. The numbers are tight, I admitted. We'd need significant backing from private equity, and all executives would need to contribute personally. But it's doable. The room erupted in discussion. Some executives immediately supported the idea. Others expressed concern about the financial risk. My father remained uncharacteristically quiet until the room finally fell silent, all eyes turning to him as our chief technical architect. What do you think, Victor? I asked. Technically speaking, what would Global Tech's acquisition mean for our systems? They would likely maintain the core AI technology, he said carefully. But the integration work we've done, the balance between Nexus innovation and Meridian reliability, would be lost. They don't value that equilibrium. There was a deeper meaning beneath his words that wasn't lost on me. The balance we had fought so hard to achieve, not just in our systems but between us, would be another casualty of Global Tech's acquisition. I support the buyout, he said finally, and I'm prepared to contribute significantly to make it happen. After the meeting, he asked to speak with me privately. How much do you need from each executive? He asked once we were alone. At least $2 million each to make the numbers work, I admitted. It's a big ask. He nodded thoughtfully. I can contribute $5 million. I stared at him in surprise. $5 million? That's more than double what we need. I've been with Meridian for 30 years, he explained. My stock options and investments have accumulated, and I have no other family to leave it to. The statement hung in the air between us, a reminder of our complicated history and uncertain future. Thank you, I said simply. There's something else, he added. Something I've been considering for some time. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table between us. What's this? I asked. The deed to my house, he explained, and transfer papers. I'm putting it in your name. I stared at him, bewildered. I don't understand. When I threw you out 15 years ago, I took away your home, he said quietly. I can never fully make that right, but this is a start. Don't need your house, I said, pushing the folder back toward him. I have my own place. It's not about need, he replied. It's about restitution, acknowledgement of wrong. The house belongs to you now, whether you choose to live in it, sell it, or burn it to the ground. The gesture left me speechless. It was simultaneously grand and inadequate, a material offering that couldn't heal emotional wounds. I need time to think about this, I finally said. He nodded. Of course. As I drove home that night, my mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. The Global Tech threat, the buyout plan, my father's unexpected gesture. 15 years ago, he had thrown me out with nothing, forcing me to build my life from scratch. Now, as I faced the biggest challenge of my professional career, he stood ready to contribute not just financially, but symbolically, returning what he had once taken away. The irony wasn't lost on me. My success had finally brought my father back into my life, and now that same success threatened to separate us again if Global Tech succeeded in their acquisition, unless we found a way to fight back together. The 48 hours following Global Tech's proposal were the most intense of my professional life. I barely slept, dividing my time between rallying executive support for our buyout plan, securing commitments from potential private equity partners, and preparing a compelling presentation for our board of directors. By the time I entered the boardroom for the decisive meeting, I was running on caffeine and determination. I had secured verbal commitments from 3 private equity firms and personal investment pledges from every executive except one, totaling over $40 million. The board members sat in grim silence as Philip Alderman presented Global Tech's formal offer, a 60% premium over our current stock price, even higher than initially indicated. This represents extraordinary value for shareholders, he concluded smoothly. We're prepared to move quickly. Lawrence Bennett nodded. Thank you, Philip. Now, I understand our CEO has an alternative proposal. I took my place at the head of the table, acutely aware of the 12 pairs of eyes evaluating me. Among them was my father, seated midway down the table, his expression carefully neutral. Global Tech's offer is financially attractive, I began. But it comes at an unacceptable cost. Their acquisition strategy consistently follows the same pattern: acquire innovative companies, extract their intellectual property, eliminate redundant, personnel, often up to 70% of the workforce, and discard what remains. I presented our financial performance, growth trajectory, and the private equity commitments I'd secured. We're proposing a management-led buyout that would take Nexus Meridian private at a fair premium to shareholders while preserving our company's integrity and our employees' livelihoods. Questions came rapidly from board members, most centered on financing details and shareholder value. I answered each methodically, drawing on 24 hours of intensive preparation. "This is a noble sentiment," Philip interjected during a brief lull, "but ultimately impractical. Our offer provides certainty. Ms. Chen's plan relies on speculative financing and personal risk." "There's nothing speculative about our commitments," I countered. "Our executive team is personally investing over $40 million. That's how much we believe in Nexus Meridian's future." The deliberation stretched for hours. As the meeting finally moved toward a vote, Lawrence called for final statements. Philip emphasized shareholder obligation and Global Tech's premium. When my turn came, I decided to abandon my prepared closing and speak from the heart. 15 years ago, I was thrown out of my home with nothing but $200 and a backpack, I said quietly. I built my career from scratch, without connections, without financial support, driven by a belief that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. I saw several board members exchange confused glances, clearly unaware of my personal history. Nexus Meridian embodies that principle. We've created systems that enhance human capability rather than replacing it. Our integrated approach preserves jobs while improving productivity. Global Tech views employees as expendable. We view them as essential. I paused, gathering my thoughts. My father sits on this board, Victor Chen. More surprised glances between board members who had never connected us. 15 years ago, he told me I would never amount to anything pursuing my foolish dreams in technology. Today, he's committing $5 million of his personal savings to help save the company we've built together. I met my father's gaze directly. His eyes widened slightly at my public acknowledgement of our relationship. People can change. Companies can evolve, but only if given the chance. I'm asking you to give Nexus Meridian that chance. The board voted 7-5 in favor of our buyout plan, rejecting Global Tech's offer. As Philip Alderman stormed out, Lawrence approached me. "That was quite a revelation about you and Victor," he said quietly. "I had no idea." "It's a complicated story," I replied. "Most important ones are," he observed before heading out. My father waited until the boardroom had emptied. "You didn't need to share our history," he said as he approached. "I didn't do it for dramatic effect," I explained. "I did it because it's relevant. If you hadn't thrown me out, I might never have developed the resilience that led me here. And if you hadn't changed, we wouldn't be preserving what we built together." He considered this carefully. "Perhaps you're right." "I usually am," I replied with a small smile, a trait I inherited from someone. For the first time in our adult relationship, I saw him smile genuinely in return. "Your mother would say you got the stubbornness from me and the wisdom from her. She'd be right about that too." As we walked out together, he asked, "Have you decided about the house?" I had nearly forgotten his offer to transfer his home to me. "I still don't want it," I said after a moment, "but I appreciate what the gesture represents." He nodded slowly. "What would be meaningful to you, Olivia? If not the house, then what did I—" Question caught me off guard. What did I want from him? What could possibly address 15 years of absence? "Time," I said finally. "Not in the past, but going forward. I don't need grand gestures or material compensation, just presence, consistency." "I can do that," he said simply. In the weeks that followed, we worked side by side to execute the buyout plan. The hours were grueling, the financial stakes enormous, but gradually our vision took shape. Nexus Meridian would become privately held, freeing us from the quarterly pressures that often drove short-term thinking. During one late night at the office, as we reviewed terms with our legal team, my father suddenly asked, "Do you ever wonder how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't forced you to leave?" I considered the question carefully. I used to, all the time. But lately, I've been thinking that maybe, in some strange way, things happened as they needed to. How so? If you hadn't thrown me out, I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of. And you might never have recognized that your definition of success was too narrow. I paused. We both needed to fail in certain ways to succeed in others. He nodded thoughtfully. An expensive lesson. But a valuable one, I added. As our buyout plan finalized, I found myself thinking more about balance, not just professionally, but personally. My mother had understood what both my father and I had missed, that true success required both structure and creativity, discipline and freedom, achievement and connection. For 15 years, I had defined myself largely through professional accomplishment. Now, as I secured my greatest professional victory, I found myself wondering what else my life might hold, what other dreams might be worth pursuing. The Nexus Meridian buyout closed successfully 3 months after the board's decision. The transition to private ownership brought both challenges and opportunities. We had greater strategic freedom, but also increased personal financial risk. The executives who had committed their own funds now had a direct stake in the company's long-term success. My father and I settled into new routines as the company stabilized. Our working relationship had become surprisingly effective, his methodical approach complementing my more intuitive style. Our weekly coffee meetings continued, gradually evolving from polite exchanges to genuine conversations. During one such meeting, I noticed him looking distracted. "Something on your mind?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "I've been thinking about retirement." The statement caught me off guard. "Retirement? You're only 58. 59 next month," he corrected. "And I've been working continuously since I was 22. That's 37 years without a break." I studied him carefully. "Is this about your health?" "No," he assured me. "My last physical was perfect. It's about perspective." "What kind of perspective?" He stared into his coffee cup. "When you were 18, I couldn't imagine any path to success that didn't follow my exact blueprint. Now you're running a company worth billions, following a completely different path than the one I insisted upon." "And?" I prompted when he fell silent. "And I've been wondering what else I might be wrong about, what other experiences I might have missed by being so rigid." I couldn't help but smile. "Are you having a midlife crisis, Dad?" The word "dad" slipped out unconsciously, the first time I'd called him that since our estrangement. We both noticed, but neither commented. "Perhaps," he admitted with the ghost of a smile. "Though most men my age buy sports cars. I'm just considering stepping back from day-to-day operations." "What would you do instead?" "Travel, maybe. Your mother always wanted to see Japan. We kept postponing it. Always some reason to delay. Project deadlines. Your school schedule. Then her illness." He trailed off. "I've never been." I realized with a start that my father had been gradually revealing pieces of himself over the past months, small insights into the man behind the rigid exterior I'd grown up with. This felt like the most significant revelation yet, an admission of regret, of roads not taken. "Japan has an incredible technology sector," I said. "You could visit as a company ambassador, make some industry connections while you're there." He considered this. That would be a reasonable transition. Not a complete retirement, but a step toward it. In that moment, I recognized something important. Despite our years of conflict, my father and I shared a fundamental inability to imagine life without work at its center. Our disagreement had never been about the importance of career, only about who should control the direction of mine. "You should go," I encouraged him. "Take a month. See what it's like to explore without an agenda." 2 weeks later, he departed for Tokyo with a deliberately loose itinerary. Our communications during his absence were brief, but surprisingly warm. Photos of temple gardens, bullet trains, technological marvels. With each message, I sensed him loosening, experiencing the world beyond the narrow parameters he'd always set for himself. In his absence, I found myself reflecting on my own life choices. I had built my career partly to prove him wrong, defining success in opposition to his vision. Now that I'd achieved that vindication, what was driving me forward? What did I want beyond professional achievement? When he returned, tanned and visibly relaxed, I hardly recognized him. The perpetual tension he carried in his shoulders had eased. He smiled more easily, laughed at small jokes, listened more than he spoke. Japan was revelatory, he told me over dinner his first night back. Not just the technology, though that was impressive, but the philosophy. The balance they strive for between innovation and tradition, efficiency and mindfulness. Sounds like something Mom would have appreciated, I observed. She would have loved it, he agreed. And she would have seen the parallel to our own situation immediately. What parallel? The unnecessary division between your path and mine, the false choice between stability and passion. He set down his chopsticks. "I've made a decision, Olivia. I'd like to formally transition to an advisory role at Nexus Meridian." "Are you sure?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Your contributions are still invaluable. My technical knowledge remains useful," he acknowledged. "But the company needs fresh perspectives for its next growth phase. Mine is well established." The self-awareness in this statement, the recognition of his own limitations, was something I'd never witnessed from him before. Besides, he added with unexpected lightness, "I have other journeys planned. Europe in the spring, perhaps South America next winter. Who are you and what have you done with Victor Chen?" I teased. For the first time in my memory, he laughed without restraint. "He's evolving, albeit belatedly." As we finalized his transition to an advisory role, I found myself in the curious position of helping my father design his exit from the company. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. This collaboration to end our professional relationship was perhaps the healthiest interaction we'd ever had. On his last day as chief technical architect, the staff organized a surprise celebration. Watching him accept their good wishes, I was struck by how much respect he had earned. Not through fear or authority, but through genuine mentorship and expertise freely shared. As the party wound down, he approached me with an envelope. "I have something for you." Inside was a handwritten letter and a small silver key. "The key opens a safe deposit box," he explained. "It contains investments I've made in your name over the years." "What investments?" "After I threw you out," he said quietly, "I set aside money each month, what I would have spent on your education, your living expenses. I invested it, intending—" He paused. "Well, I'm not sure what I intended initially. Perhaps to prove I was still fulfilling some parental obligation, even in your absence." I stared at the key, emotions tumbling through me. "I don't need your money, Dad." "I know you don't," he acknowledged. "Your success has made that abundantly clear. But perhaps you could use it for something your mother would have approved of. A scholarship fund, maybe, for young women pursuing unconventional paths in technology." The suggestion touched me deeply. She would have liked that. As we walked out together, the setting sun painting the Nexus Meridian building in golden light, my father stopped and turned to me. "I was wrong, Olivia. Not just about your career path, but about what constitutes success. You've built something remarkable, not just financially, but in substance and principle. The words I had once so desperately wanted to hear now washed over me with unexpected gentleness. The vindication I had sought for 15 years had finally arrived, but I found it meant less than the simple fact of standing beside him in mutual respect. "We both got some things wrong," I admitted, "and some things right." "Balance," he said with a small smile. "Your mother would be pleased we finally found some." 5 years passed following my father's transition to an advisory role. Nexus Meridian flourished under private ownership, expanding globally while maintaining our commitment to integrating technology in ways that enhanced rather than replaced human potential. My own life had transformed as well. At 38, I had finally achieved the balance that had eluded both my father and me for so long. I'd cultivated friendships outside of work, developed hobbies beyond coding, and even found time for romance. I was now engaged to Daniel, a professor of architectural design I'd met through a mutual friend. My father had changed perhaps even more dramatically. The rigid, controlling man who had once thrown me out now spent half his year traveling and the other half consulting on special projects for Nexus Meridian. He had developed a surprising passion for photography during his travels, documenting technological innovations across different cultures. We had established a new tradition of monthly dinners where work talk was deliberately minimized in favor of more personal conversations. During one such dinner, he surprised me with an unexpected announcement. "I've been approached about a teaching position," he said as we waited for dessert. "MIT wants me to lead a special seminar series on integrated systems design." "That's perfect. For you," I replied, genuinely pleased. "Will you take it?" "I'm considering it," he nodded. "It would mean being in Boston for the fall semester." "Just in time for the wedding," I noted with a smile. A shadow of uncertainty crossed his face. "About that, I've been meaning to ask you something important." My stomach tightened instinctively. Despite our repaired relationship, old anxieties died hard. "Would it be appropriate," he continued hesitantly, "for me to walk you down the aisle? I will understand completely if you'd prefer otherwise." The question caught me completely off guard. In all our healing, we had never directly addressed milestones like this, moments where traditional family roles became inescapably relevant. "I'd been thinking about that myself," I admitted. "Actually, I had a different idea." I explained the vision I'd developed after conversations with Daniel. A ceremony that honored our unconventional journey rather than pretending we were a traditional family. "Instead of being given away, I'd like to walk down the aisle myself first, symbolizing the independence that defined so much of my life. Then halfway, I thought perhaps you could join me for the rest of the walk, representing how we found our way back to each other." His eyes grew suspiciously bright. "That's remarkably thoughtful, Olivia." "I had a good teacher in thoughtfulness," I replied. "Eventually." He smiled at the gentle teasing that had become part of our rebuilt relationship. "I would be honored." As we finished dinner, he became reflective. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if I hadn't thrown you out that day?" "Sometimes," I acknowledged. "But I've come to believe that we both needed to follow our separate paths before we could truly understand each other. Still, I wasted so many years," he said, regret evident in his voice. "Not wasted," I corrected. "Those years shaped us both. My struggle made me resilient. Your isolation eventually opened you to change. We can acknowledge the pain without wishing it away entirely." 2 months later, I found myself standing outside Nexus Meridian's newest facility, a research campus in Portland where we were pioneering human-centered automation systems. As CEO, I would formally open the building, but there was something I needed to do first. I had invited my father to meet me early, before the other executives arrived. He approached, looking distinguished in a well-tailored suit, curiosity evident in his expression. "Why the private tour?" he asked as I led him through the quiet building. "There's something I want to show you," I replied, leading him to a door marked Executive Conference Center. Inside was a spacious, light-filled room with cutting-edge technology subtly integrated into its elegant design. At the far end hung a simple plaque that read, "The Ellen Chen Innovation Lab, where creativity meets precision." My father stopped abruptly, staring at the plaque. "Ellen." Mom always understood what both of us missed, that true innovation requires both creativity and precision, intuition and analysis, heart and mind, I explained. This space is dedicated to fostering that balance. He stepped forward, touching the plaque gently. She would have loved this. I used the funds from the safe deposit box, I added, for this and for the scholarship program we launched last year for young women in tech. He nodded, too moved for words. After a moment, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in simple blue paper. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this," he said. "Today seems appropriate." Inside was a delicate silver watch with a mother-of-pearl face. I recognized it immediately from old photographs. "Mom's watch," I breathed. "She wore it every day," he confirmed. "She planned to give it to you on your 21st birthday. I should have given it to you years ago, but timing matters," I finished for him. "And maybe now is exactly when I was meant to receive it." As we stood together in the room named for the woman who had loved us both, I felt a sense of completion. The circle that had been violently broken 15 years ago when my father threw me out had finally closed, not in the same shape as before, but in a new configuration that honored both our separate journeys and our shared path forward. Later, that day, as I addressed the gathered employees and press, I glimpsed my father standing at the back of the room. His expression held something I had spent my whole life seeking, but had stopped looking for somewhere along the way. Pride, unambiguous and complete. I had once defined my entire identity around proving him wrong. Now that motivation seemed as distant as the frightened 18-year-old girl clutching $200 and a backpack. In its place was something far more valuable. The understanding that success isn't measured by titles or achievements, but by the courage to forge your own path, and the wisdom to recognize when that path leads you back to where you began, seeing everything differently. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.